All right, the last piece that we are going to pick up on is exploring the self and viewing the self, okay? So research in personality includes the topic of a person's sense of self. Topics of research include self-talk, self-esteem, self-awareness, self-monitoring, and self-control. The field has refined a definition of self as the core of personality, the organizer and reservoir of our thoughts, feelings, actions, choices, and attitudes. Okay, so topics for our study of people's sense of self include things like the spotlight effect, which is self-consciousness, self-esteem, high and low, and the benefits and risks, self-serving bias, narcissism, self-disparagement, and secure self-esteem. So, self-consciousness. The spotlight effect is something, they did an experiment where students put on a Barry Manilow t-shirts before entering a room with other students, and the result was that students thought others would notice the t-shirt, assume people were looking at them, when generally this was not the case. They greatly overestimated the extent to which the spotlight was on them, thus referring to the spotlight effect, which is assuming that people have attention focused on you when they are not actually may not be noticing you, when they actually may not be noticing you. I think I read that completely wrong. Basically, you think that people are looking at you a whole lot more than they actually are. So, and this plays a huge role in our self-consciousness because we all know that moment when that's happened to us. So the lesson is here that people don't notice our errors, quirks, features, and shirts as much as we think that they do. Now, what about self-esteem? There's both high and low and good and bad. Okay, so people who have normal or high self-esteem, feeling confident and valuable and get some of the benefits. They increased resistance to conformity pressure, decreased harm from bullying, increased resilience and efforts to improve on their own mood. But maybe this high self-esteem is really realistic and is a result, not a cause of these successes. So there's some kind of debate as to whether and where high self-esteem comes from. Is it the cause or is it the effect? Now, low self-esteem, even temporarily lowered by insults, leads to problems such as prejudice and being overly critical of others. The self-serving bias, we generally tend to think we are all above average. This bias can help defend our self-esteem as it does for people in this wheel. Right? At least I'm not as dumb as she is. At least I'm not as old as her. I'm not, I don't know what that one says. My life is easier than that tragic soul, kind of thing. So the self-serving bias is, to think that we are all at least above average. And it serves as a protective mechanism for our self-esteem. Now, what about self-focus and narcissism? Since the 1980s, song lyrics have become more focused on the self, both gratification and self-praise. Empathy scores and skills are decreasing, being lost. People increasingly don't bother trying to see things from the perspective of others. Okay, there's a rise in narcissism, self-absorption, self-gratification, inflated but fragile self-worth. And narcissists see themselves as having a special place in the world. The danger is, especially in narcissism, is when self-esteem is threatened, it can trigger defensive aggression. And preventing this aggressive defense in self-esteem, not raising self-esteem but reinforcing it, having people state their own values and qualities. So, one of the things that we're seeing is that there is this increased self-focus, and because of that, there's an increase in narcissism, which is causing aggressive tendencies, but also kind of this decrease in overall general self-esteem of people. Then there's also idea of self-disparagement versus self-acceptance. Left behind in the supposed increase in egotism, those who feel worthless and unlovable. Some people have a habit of self-disparaging self-talk. For instance, I'm no good, I'm going to fail. Sometimes such remarks are a sign of depression or at least feeling inferior, and sometimes such remarks may elicit pity or prepare us for possible bad events or help us to learn from our mistakes. People are more critical of their past selves. So self-disparagement can actually be a very bad thing because it doesn't help us accept who we are and what we want. Uh-oh.